So, welcome to week one, day three of India Evening and Weekend Platoon. So, we're going to talk a little bit about Git. We're going to talk about GitHub and whatever questions you guys have. So, I first want to start things off with a little bit of a refresher for Git, which is kind of the underlying principle behind which GitHub works. So, Danny, since you asked the question, I'll bounce one back to you just to start things off. What exactly is Git, as you understand it?
The way I understand it is Git is just something that's locally on your computer, like a source, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, that is correct. But what exactly is it? Like, what does it do on your computer?
I'm sorry, and you said the question is what does GitHub do on the computer?
Or just Git? We're not talking about the hub
Oh,
part, just Git. And we'll make it open
oh,
season, so anyone can take it.
oh yeah. I'll take a shot at it. So Git creates the basically creates code for your local computer, but it's not published code. It's just local to your computer. So you're able to. It's like a workspace, a code workspace for your local computer.
Perfect. Yes, the last part is what I was looking for. So Git is what you can use to do version control. That's like the simple answer. What is Git? Git is a version control like command line tool, program, software, whatever you want to call it. Git is it's a nice way in like Google Docs or Word. If you make changes to a document and you hit the track your changes button, you can kind of think of Git as doing something relatively similar to that. So, or it's kind of so if you have five different versions of a Python script, Git will allow you to track the differences between each of those five versions. And you can also tell yourself what things changed in between those different versions. So this is just, essentially me creating a new repository on my local machine and adding some things and doing some stuff with Git status. So let's talk through a little bit of this. So well, again, these are just a bunch of commands that hopefully everyone's seen at least once before on Tuesday. So I'm just going to pick people at random and ask you guys to walk me through certain things. So, who's on my screen? August. What am I doing with these three lines of code?
Um, I do not know.
Okay, that's fine. Do you want to pick somebody to answer the question?
Um, do I? Let me see.
This way, I'm not the main instructor and August is.
Okay, the only guy under me is Kent.
All right, Kent, you want to take it?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so it looks like right here so you made a directory called W1 Whiskey 1 Delta 3, right? And then you CD'd so you opened it up, right? You CD'd into a WD3, W1D3, and then you're initializing the repository with git init.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Now you get a break as we have the rest of the class cycle through. Okay. So yeah. So again, you make a folder, you open the folder and create a Git repository. Git repositories can basically only be created inside a folder. If you don't have a folder, no Git. So it's also just a good thing to keep in mind as well when you're making projects. Make your projects within a folder. Like, I'm sure everyone has seen like the desktops that have like 300 files on them. That does not go away in the software engineering world, unfortunately. So if you have 10 projects and you're working on them all at the same time, and they're all on the desktop with files everywhere, it's a mess. Please don't do that. So it is so much easier to make a folder and do everything within that folder, especially for version control. So yes, Git init happens within a folder. All right, so let's skip ahead a little bit. Another thing that I also like to tell people from the start, if you see an error message, knowing how to fix it is one thing, but knowing how to interpret and understand it is another. So, we'll just make this an open question. Can anyone tell me what happened with this thing that I pasted in and the response that I got back. Also, is everyone able to see the console okay, or do I need to zoom in?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Wasn't
Um,
it, didn't
you
it just
tried to-
kick back an error because you didn't create it before trying to add it?
Perfect. Yep. Thanks, Tony. Yeah. So again, like half of the battle with errors is reading and understanding the error message. It is really easy to see a long message like this, and like your brain might fixate on one part of it, and then you go down a rabbit hole trying to fix it for like 20 minutes, and you realize you did not attack the source of the error. You have to go and reread the whole thing. That happens to everyone a lot. So the way I first built in my own debugging habits is just get practice reading these error messages. And
You sure? Sorry about that. Excuse me. Sorry.
no worries. So again, as Tony mentioned, you just read the example, read the message that comes out. It says it didn't mesh any files. Well, that means a file probably doesn't exist. And if you check here, I just made the directory, as Kent mentioned. And when you make a directory, there's nothing in the directory. So how can you add something when nothing's there? Hence the error. So then, I touched a new example file. I checked what was in my directory with ls. And then now I ran git status. So git status is a good command to know and write down on a sticky note or memorize, because it's 2 words. That essentially tells you what's changed between the last time you did something with git and the current state. Now in this case, between when I created the repository up here and this time, I added this example.txt file, which is now untracked. And then that's why I had to add it to my Git. Now, does adding a file to Git, like just running git add, does that save my changes in
No,
Git? No. Okay, so Scott, what do I have to do after?
you have to set it so it'll track it with git add dot to add everything, or like you did right there, git add example.txt to add just the one file.
Okay, yep. So let's say we added it. Is our job done after adding it? Or is there anything else we need to do?
Nope, still got to commit it. So it's
Perfect.
staged right now, and then commit it.
Yep. Okay, great. So yeah, again, and another nice way you can tell that too is like sometimes when I was first learning Git, whenever I would type git and then some command, the next thing I would do is type git status. Like, just in case, it's really helpful because that allows you to just see where every single step in the process is going. Might seem a little redundant to like paste in git status every time you do something, but when you're first learning, it can be very helpful. So as you mentioned, right, when you're adding it, it adds a change to be committed, which then I committed over here. Can somebody tell me what this -m my first commit, what does that mean?
Your commit message.
What's the benefit? Why do we need commit messages? Are they required?
No, but you should use them.
Yeah, so it's best practice, just in case. So you actually label what you're adding. So if you're adding, such and such feature, you can just say what this is that you're adding.
Exactly. It might be a little bit silly to do this for an example.txt file, or by changing hello to goodbye in the file or something like that. But remember, Git is all about version control. Let's say that you have version 1 of the next Google on your computer. You upload that, and then a month later, you now need to upload a second version of Google, or you need to go back to the version before the first version of Google to figure out the differences and what changed. Maybe there's a bug in whatever you've deployed or something like that. Well, before digging through hundreds or thousands of lines of code, a nice, easy way to tell what's changed between versions that are saved in Git is check the commit messages. That, as Kent and Scott both alluded to, those provide a track record of whatever you did if you do a good job with it. And keeping your commit messages more verbose than less is totally fine. There's no penalty for writing like three sentence or writing a sentence instead of just did work. So that right at this stage, you don't need to be writing prose, but it's a good idea to put in a commit message, even if it's something super simple like added file or renamed such and such. It's good practice. All right, great. So we talked about commit status. Oh, this is a good one. So let's see. Let me pick on somebody else if you guys don't mind, or if you do mind, you can't change it. Dan, can you talk to me a little bit about the difference between get branch and get checkout?
Well, get branch, you can have like your master or your main, and then you can have like sub branches in like development or production, things like that. Um, Checkout, you're basically pulling the code from that branch down to your local machine.
So that is close. So
Because I was
get
talking, you know,
so get branch just tells you what branch you're on. Get checkout is what you can use to create a new branch. So at the start here, we only had one branch. The default branch that is created when you create a repository is the master branch. When you do get checkout and you have put in the -b flag and put in something else afterwards, that creates your new branch. And that's how, again, we run get branch again, and it tells us that we're on branch Victor 1. So again, Dan summarized the benefits of branches pretty well, so not gonna go into that. But as you can see here, when you go to get status, oh yeah, Justin, go ahead.
Continue on. There's a question in the chat too. So when you're done with that.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we'll go through this real quick, and then we'll take some questions. So as you see with the get status, firstly, the difference between this get status and this one up here is the first get status very clearly tells you that you're on the master branch. Once we switch branches, our get status also shows that. Also note that in our first get status up here, after we made the commit, it says that the working tree is clean, aka we don't have any weird file discrepancies or nothing's latent. Versus here, we added a file, right, with the dot notation, as I think Kent might have mentioned earlier. And then now it says that we have a change to be committed in here. So we just go through the same thing with the git commit messages. All right, so let me check out these questions real quick. When you use -m to make a message, where does the message go? Yep, so as Kent mentioned, this will show up when you do git log, which we can actually probably do that right now. So git log just shows you all of the changes that you've made, pretty much. So on this specific branch, and it shows us here which branch specifically. So this is the V1 branch, and it gives you who made it, the date that this thing was made, and then also the commit message. The nice thing also here is it also shows you all of the prior commits that apply. So it's not just the most recent one made on this branch, but this branch was created after the master branch was created, and I made a commit, which I called my first commit. So git log is a good way to see that. All right, looks like the other questions are being/have been answered. So also, if you guys have questions, feel free to raise your hands and ask too. That's more than okay. So yeah, this was our super quick Git review before we move on to GitHub. Any questions about this, or is everything mostly making sense so far?
So earlier you said get checkout was used to make new branches, but I've been using it to switch between branches.
Yep.
So I'm a little confused on that.
It's for both.
Okay.
Yep. So if I wanted to switch this back to main, So let's just do git branch. We'll see what the branches are. Got master and V1, and I'm on V1. It also says it right here as well, right at the end of my folder tree, which is nice. So if I want to switch back, we'll just do git checkout main, or I guess let's just probably do master. There we go, switch to branch master, and we'll just do git branch to confirm it. I've already confirmed it there, but then switch back to master.
And then you use the dash B to make a new branch, correct?
So if I were to do git checkout dash B and then type in something, that would create a brand new branch.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That was a good question. Any others?
I do have one.
Yep, go for it.
How do I erase a branch? Let's say I didn't want to write that. How do I get rid of it? And also how I get rid of it if I send it to GitHub already.
So we're gonna get to the GitHub part soon. In order to delete a branch though, so let's create a brand new branch right now. Git checkout. Let me make this nice and short. That's a new branch. Let's say I don't want this branch, so I should probably delete it. So let's try a git branch. I think the command for this is -d in order to delete something. So let's see if this will work, if I'm within the branch. Okay. Let's try switching to another one. Okay, there we go. So, few things, and for instance, this is a good reminder because I haven't actually deleted a branch in a long time. So number one, you can't delete a branch when you're on the branch itself. It's like, logically, that makes sense. If you're like climbing a tree and you're trying to saw off a branch, you probably don't want to saw off the branch that you're on, or else you're gonna, break your leg. So you have to switch branches, and then after that, you can delete another one. But you do that using git branch and then the -d flag.
So that's exactly what was happening. Then I couldn't erase the branch because I was in the branch itself.
Yep. And then again, we can also just make sure that the branch was deleted by checking git branch, and we see we just have the 2 branches left. Good question. Any others before we move on to git?
One last question. So, like, what is the whole purpose of like using a bunch of different branches?
This is a good question. So, how many people here are gamers? Maybe a few?
Probably
All
all
right.
of us.
Okay. So, can somebody explain to me what a beta test is?
I mean, the game's just not completely finished, so you got play testers to come in and find out what bugs and what's not working and stuff like that.
Yep, that's part of it. But another part of it could be a beta test for some new feature, right? Like you might have a stable branch for the game. Like if you're in Steam and you're playing like an older game by like an indie dev, and you go into like the settings, you probably download one of like 6 different versions of the game. One of which might be on an experimental branch or on a beta branch. That's pretty much the same logic as you use for branching in GitHub. Like for example, you might have a stable branch of your backend, but you might need an experimental branch for your backend that is calling out to a bunch of different data sources. Or if you're bringing in if you're trying to overhaul your database entirely, which has happened, but you don't want to delete your original data, which has also happened. You probably want to save some of the stuff you're working on, but then also leave room to play with things on another branch. So in that sense, branches are a nice tool for kind of saving your progress, if you will, like when you're trying something new. And again, just for the rest of version control.
Okay, thank you. That actually helps a lot.
Yeah, no problem. And as Sam notes, branches are really important for like your full stack dev project and really just about everything else you'll do in this course. Now, will you need to make like 4 separate branches for the type of like homework problems that you'll be doing on Saturday, which are like factorial problems? No. Will you probably want different branches if you and 3 other people are working on an application that has 50 different files organized in 3 different apps and with a bunch of different versions? Yes. So it's not immediately applicable like right here and now, but knowing how to branch or how to check out on, as Francis alluded to, removing branches, super important too.
One last question.
Yeah.
I've seen that Git checkout and Git switch are almost the same. I think the difference is, I don't know, that you actually bring out the comments as well, branches that have been committed or not. What's the difference between those two? Because they do, apparently they both do the same, right?
They do generally do the same thing. My understanding is that Git's checkout has a little bit more additional functionality built into it with some of its flags. But I'm not too familiar when you'd want to use one over the other. My experience with it has been generally that you can use them pretty interchangeably.
Checkout's the old way of doing it. They've since come out with branch, but checkout does that, adds flags. It's kind of like do a bunch of stuff that may not need to be done, where the switch is more precise as to what you're trying to do. It's recommended you use switch going forward.
Thank you for that, Justin. Always saving the day. So, all right, disregard everything I did then. Use switch and don't do this stuff.
Either way, in this instance, it doesn't matter.
All right, any other questions before we actually talk about today's real lecture topic? All right, so Git and GitHub. Actually, before we do GitHub, this is a trivia question. I don't want to see all of this stuff in my console. Like, this is just a bunch of random stuff that is really not relevant to what we're going to be doing for the rest of the day. I could just close my console entirely, but then I'd have to go back and re-navigate to my folder tree. I don't want to do that. How can I just like wipe all of the history out? Okay, well, the chat's faster. Thank you. Good. So also, one thing to keep in mind, these console skills that you guys are mentioning with knowing commands like ls and clear and touch, you're not gonna need them at your like fingertips pretty quickly. But if like going through the console is usually a pretty surefire way to not mess things up compared to using a user interface. So keep those skills sharp. And as Justin and Nick can attest to, in my classes, I usually do try to test people on these skills. So keep the pop quizzes in mind. All right. So Git and GitHub. Let's see, who have I not heard from yet?
I do
Nicholas.
have one last question before we move forward, and I think
Go for it.
this is just from my inexperience on everything. But when I was inputting specific things, and then it would pull up like VS Code, and then I would go to save that. I'm sure there's an easier way to do it. I don't know, so I'm asking. But is there a way I can save it without closing it in the application? Like it would be, say I can't remember what the problems were from the startup, but it was like code something, and then I would input, I put my input into the dash, and then it said to save it, and what I kept doing was just inherently I would close out the whatever application it pulled up to execute. Am I making any sense with my question? Or?
Are you talking about in VS Code, or are you talking about in terminal?
I can't remember specifically what it was, but when I input something in there, it pulled up VS Code to then put an input in. And so then when I went to save it, instead of just doing what I'm sure most developers or anybody with experience does, I just hit the X button, and it asked me to save it so that the file could be created.
Okay. I mean, I think to me it sounds like what you probably did is if you're in terminal, you type something like code 123.txt and then hit enter, and then that created like a new VS Code window.
Correct. Yes. And then then it said to put something, input something into VS Code. And when I did that, in order to save it, I just kept closing out the window. I just didn't know if there was an easier way to do that.
Um, yeah, I mean, as Logan mentioned in the chat, just manually saving it with Control S, or for the Mac folks on there, Command S.
Okay.
That should do the trick.
Okay. Perfect.
One thing to keep in mind, VS Code does not autosave, so you're gonna want to manually save relatively frequently. Save often is generally my mantra. Like what I like to do is whenever I've made something that I think is a change, like deleting a line, adding a print statement, my left hand automatically hits Control S, like just as a force of habit. And I recommend building that into your guys' workflows as well. All right, so GitHub. Okay, who have I not heard from yet? And Danny, I know you asked the question for GitHub, so I'm not going to ask you. So V, can you tell me a little bit about what GitHub is from your experience so far?
Just from my experience, I mean, it's just all our repository of whatever code you have, but I mean, and it's just the place where we can share, it's a version control management system where you can just um, share it amongst your team and yourselves.
But hang on, didn't we just say that Git was a version control management system? Why do we need
GitHub.
GitHub?
GitHub. What's that?
Why do we need GitHub if we already have Git?
Git is just what we use locally to communicate with GitHub.
Perfect. Yes. GitHub is Git plus internet. Like at the most elementary level. It's great to have version control on your computer for your local project. But if I'm working on something with Scott, who is not at my computer, it would be really nice if I had a way to see what he was working on, be able to pull that down and push up my changes, but also see what changes he's making and see if our versions are incompatible. And that's basically where GitHub comes in. So Git equals local changes. GitHub equals pushing your stuff up to a remote location, basically at some server located somewhere that GitHub and Microsoft own and control. So I think Danny was the one who asked originally about if we can just push up to GitHub from our computers without creating a repository. The answer to that is no. So let me see if I can switch to the appropriate window on my computer with GitHub. Where are we? Here we go. All right, so everyone can see the curriculum for today, right? Okay, awesome. Thank you, Justin. So as it says over here, you need, in order to create your own repository, go to GitHub, sign in. You should ideally, okay, that's weird. Ideally, you should be signed in. And then we're going to just go ahead and create a new repository. So where's the plus? We'll create a new repository. And let's see, what do I want to call this? Yeah, solid garbanzo. That sounds great. That doesn't sound very tasty, unless it's like microwaved, but that works. And I am going to be the owner of this repository. And we're gonna keep everything else the same for now, nice and simple, and we'll create the repo. So this is doing basically the same thing as our git init did locally, except this is doing git init on GitHub server somewhere that is tied in to my account. Okay, great. So I've made this repository. As you can see, There is nothing in it. It's completely blank. And the nice thing is GitHub actually tells us where to go from here. So we don't need to create a new repository, right? Because if I go back to my command line, right, and we just type let's see what ls. Actually, let me switch branch. Let's just do it on this branch. Let's do a git status, and you see we are already in a Git repository, so we don't need to initialize one. But we do have an existing repository that we can push up, which is listed all the way down here at the bottom. So there's the thing I like about GitHub is it tells you what commands to do. The thing I don't like about GitHub, which is why I'm here, is it doesn't tell me what on earth these commands actually do. So the way I like to teach this usually is by copy pasting each command into my terminal and walking through it and seeing what happens. So let's do the first one with this git remote add origin and then the rest of this link. So let's see. I'll pick somebody else. Andrew, what exactly is this link?
It's the link to the repository that you created.
Yeah, perfect. So based on that information, what do we all collectively think this command, this whole line does?
It adds the repository for the push, basically, like the location of where to go and come back from.
Yeah, or even more simply, this whole thing connects the local Git stuff on my computer and gives it a place at that remote server repository thingy to connect to. It connects my local stuff to intranet stuff. So this line facilitates that initial connection. So let's run this and see what happens. Oh, great. Absolutely nothing. Okay. So usually when nothing happens, that's either a fantastic sign that everything's gone right, or a terrible sign that something that you did not expect to go wrong has gone wrong. I really hope it's not the latter, but we can check a couple things. Okay, Git status, that looks normal. But now that we're using GitHub, there's another thing that we can check here as well. So let's type in git remote -v. So this tells us that we now have connected Git, which is again our local thing, to this GitHub repository. And it's telling us that we can both fetch and push from there. In other words, I can pull stuff down from whatever is in this repository, and I can push stuff up to whatever is in the repository. Now, the only thing that we've done so far is just set up this linkage between local and GitHub. We have not sent over anything from our local machine to what's on GitHub. In order to do that, we're going to need to push stuff up to GitHub. So how can we do that? Well, let's just try writing git push and see what happens. Okay, so did this work?
Megatron.
Okay, so why not?
You gotta
The
save it
repository doesn't. I thought the repo doesn't exist on GitHub.
Is that what it says? Let's read through the message carefully. So it says fatal. So that's probably a bad sign, because I don't think I've ever heard that in a good context before. The current branch master has no upstream branch. And push the current branch and set the remote as upstream. Use this command. So basically, we have a place to push up to, but we just aren't specifying where within this thing to push up to. So copy pasting this command in ought to solve our problem, ideally. So the command that Git is suggesting we do and it's saying, hey, I want you to push this repository with the master branch up to this GitHub repository, but I want to link this permanently to pushing this master branch up to the origin repo as well. So the step upstream makes it so that later we just need to write git push. We don't need to do all this other stuff. So let's hit enter, see what happens. So we're not going to discuss this in too much detail, but basically it's saying, how many things am I going to be pushing up? Okay, let me count that all three of these things exist. Now, each of these things that I'm pushing has some, metaphorical weight to it and takes up some storage. So let's keep track of that and then shoot those things up from local up to my GitHub. And then it says that it's done. Now, a couple nice things that this does too. It tells us that we've set up a new branch. Now, where is it set up the new branch? And set up the new branch at the GitHub repository. And it's telling us that we went from the local master branch to the repository's master branch. And that's basically what this line here says. Does that make sense? Does that explanation make sense? Any questions?
That was hands down the best explanation. I've been watching a lot of videos, but that was really well. And my question too is, when we say upstream origin master, are we saying the master origin from the Git or origin master to GitHub?
So the remote repository, the thing on GitHub, is
Gotcha.
origin.
Gotcha.
Yep. But also, my explanation could be complete bunkus, and I could be telling you guys that this thing is going to work great, and I could be lying. There's a super nice and simple way to tell that what I'm doing is either completely fake, in which case Justin will take over the class, or actually works. So let's go to wherever my browser is in solid garbanzo. And hang on, this thing still looks blank. Did I make a mistake somewhere?
Refresh your browser.
Thank you. If you make a git push on your local machine, and if you switch your tabs to your GitHub repository and you don't see any changes, refresh the page. Just like how VS Code doesn't autosave, GitHub doesn't auto-refresh. So make sure you're doing that. Helps a lot. And as we see here, I've got my example.txt, which has nothing in it because I didn't put anything in it. But Danny, to answer your question, and I think somebody else asked this, maybe Michael, asked where you can see your commit messages. That's a commit message right there. That's the one that I put in after git commit -m, and it shows you what file I added when. All right, so that is the gist of how to push up to GitHub. Now, let's just play around with this interface a little bit. So we see here that I've got one commit, and I can see the history. I can see when I committed it. And note that this shows me when I committed it locally, which is nice. See what else? Yep, gives me a nice little reference number with some commit details. Shows you the files that were added in green or removed in red. And then in here, it'll also usually, if you have a file that you've changed, it'll show you the changes too. So it's a nice, helpful way to do a visual reference to check that. Now, something seems kind of off about this. If we look here, it says that we have one branch, which is just master. But when we were going through my code earlier, I could swear that I had a second branch somewhere, right? I can check that here. Git branch. I have two branches. I have master and v1. But in GitHub, I only have master. What happened there? The answer is that git push only pushed up one branch at a time. So let's go ahead and switch branches super briefly and see if we can push up our V1 branch. So let's see. So we go do git checkout. I'm still going to use the old way. What flag do I need to put to switch branches, if anyone remembers?
I'm not sure what you mean by flag.
Get
Or what?
switch.
Well, if I say git switch, how do I specify which branch I want to send it to or switch to?
Oh, you just
Type
type
in
in the branch name?
Name.
That works. Also, if you're doing it with git checkout, it'll do a -b and then the branch name. So the little thingy after the dash, like the -b, -v, -- set upstream. Pretty sure we did a -d when deleting stuff. That's known as flag. And just within command line lingo. That's probably something good to remember or keep in mind. All right, so I've switched over to my other branch where we can confirm that we're on V1 because it says it right there. And I'm going to triple check it with git status. And it says here that we're on branch V1. So let me just make sure, see the files that are in here. As we see, I have two files now on my branch V1. We have the original file that I uploaded before, but I also added this example1.py file, right? So we have that change. So I want to be able to push up that change to my GitHub. And we can check that that change has been station confirmed here, right? Via this this git log. So we added this file to this branch, but then we also did this thing with origin master and master with that first commit. So let's go ahead and figure out how to push up this branch. So what happens if I just do git push? Hang on, I swear I've seen this error before. This error with the git push is the exact same error as the one that we got way back here when we did our first push to GitHub. So what we need to do here is we need to specify where we're going to send our branch to. In the original, we said that we were going to send it to a branch called master on GitHub. Now, do I necessarily want my V1 branch to also go to master on GitHub? Especially if this is like a beta branch or experimental? Probably not. So what GitHub usually recommend, or Git usually recommends, is that you name your local branch and the branch on GitHub the same thing. However, we're going to be a little bit different and say that we're not going to do that just for purposes of experimentation. I usually also like to name them the same thing, but just to show you guys how this works, let's call this thing like test branch. Okay, never mind. Let's do this as V1 so that it actually works. Perfect. There we go. So absolutely nothing happened, and that was the intention from the start. So let's talk through this very briefly before we make sure that this change actually worked. So it counted the objects, it compressed some stuff and wrote them up. And it now says that we have a new branch created here, which is V1, that's tracking V1 on GitHub. So if I switch my tabs again, and we go back to GitHub, go to solid garbanzo, and take a look, we now see that I have two branches listed here. The default branch is mir master branch. I can switch branches by clicking, and you now see that we have the second branch that has a comment attached to it, or a commit message. So we have two different commit messages here. This commit message is from the master branch when I created it and pushed it up. This commit message is from the change I made on this branch. So does pushing up to different branches, does that part make sense? Are there any questions about this before we move on to?
Do we have to do the whole git push set upstream again once we've done it, or next time it could be maybe just git push?
Nope. So you should just be able to do git push for the next one. So let's just check that to make sure that I'm not wrong. So let's see. I'm gonna just go into let's see what's in here. Now we're gonna do code example1.py. I'm just gonna open it up in my browser here. Oh, okay. VS Code wants to do that. So also, for those of you who are using VS Code on Windows and using Windows Shell for Linux, sometimes you may run into this problem where if you haven't opened up your shell in a little while, you kind of have to reinstall VS Code server because it likes to do periodic updates. The good thing is that the updates are relatively quick. Bad thing, it still has to do an update. So if we switch to VS Code, and I'm assuming everyone's opened up and played around with VS Code a little bit, right? Okay, so it's opening remote. It says that it's sourcing from WSL Ubuntu, and all right, that's fine. Folder could, okay, perfect. So, and you see here, I've got my folder tree listed, which is a good sign. Let's just do a print, hello world. Save that, manually save it, and we'll exit out of it. So we'll switch it back here.
We're getting a lot of jitter and latency there.
Yeah, my computer is deciding to start breathing fire. No idea why, but I think that's why it tells me it needs a restart. But I'll do that during the break. Hopefully the latency is better now. Okay, cool. So we just made that change with our example one. So let's just go ahead and do a git status. As you see here, when I change something in there, it says that I made a modification. So let's do a git add. We're gonna again do a git status. All right. So does anyone remember what I have to do after a git add?
Commit.
Yep, git commit. We'll say hello world. All right. And we'll just do git status one more time. So the branch has been changed. Okay. The nice thing here is it says that I need to do a git push. So to answer Francis's question, finally, what happens if I just say git push? Looks like it worked. That's always a good sign. But the reason for that is, I think, as I hopefully mentioned before, when you do the, oh boy, and this is the other thing I don't like about the console is everything looks identical. So when you do the git push set upstream origin, or this one, that kind of permanently sets the relationship between your branch and the branch on GitHub. So after that, you don't have to use this piece of code again unless you're creating and doing this on a brand new branch. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Thank you. Can you put git log, please, one more time?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So the head is actually in B1, which is the last branch you create, right? That's what the head is at. So that's the last comment, right? That's what it means.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And yeah, we can always confirm that our change is actually reflected by refreshing the page. And we now see that example1.py has hello world listed there. We can click it and we see that my lovely, beautiful, totally working piece of code is listed. Okay, there is one last thing that that we should probably talk through, which is a git pull. So this is something that you guys are going to need to do for your assignments in the near future. So let me close out of this real quick, and let's find something nice to do a git pull on in here. Okay, actually, let's just do it with this repository, the GitHub practice repo. So everyone can see that, I'm assuming, right? Okay. Hopefully the answer to that is yes. So this is a repository on GitHub, just like the one I just created. I want to pull down the stuff from this repository onto my computer. Now, there's a couple of ways I can do that. The super easy way is I can go in here, I can copy paste all of this text into a readme.md file on my computer, and then I can go into dev container and go into every file in dev container and copy paste that on my computer and replicate the folder tree exactly. Now, for something with 3 files, that's not the worst idea. However, for something with 300 files, that's a really bad idea. So the nice thing is GitHub gives us a nice way to pull things down onto our computers locally. And we can do that if we go to code and then clone to local, as it says it right here with HTTPS. We're going to copy this URL, and then I'm going to switch back to my console. Let's go to week 1, day 3. So let me do a clear. Let's see. I'm going to head out of this directory, and let's just clone it. Let's clone it right here. So, how do I clone something down from GitHub? Has anyone done this before or have any ideas?
Git clone paste.
Perfect. So as you'll see, this kind of does the opposite thing of git push. I mean, conceptually, but also in terms of when it's writing stuff out, right? So it's doing the same thing with enumerating the objects and compressing them, but here it talks about receiving objects rather than sending. So that's something good to keep in mind. So we can also just do an ls, make sure that this was actually created. We can cd into GitHub practice. And when you change directory into it, look at that. It tells us that we are in a Git repo. So when you're cloning something down or pulling something down from GitHub onto your local machine, it's going to automatically create that in the form of a Git repo. This is different from what we did before, where you created the folder locally and then you had to initialize that Git repository. So when you're pulling down or cloning down, it's always going to be a Git repo. So when you do this, you can make the changes in here, kind of like we did before, and then push it back up, no problem. That's really about it for GitHub fundamentals. And Logan, no, you do not need to init a cloned repo. I mean, we can just check that. We do like a git status. We are already on a main branch, and that's up to date. So you've got, you're locally we're good, and then we're also good in terms of the connection to that remote repository. All right. So before we fully wrap up, I'm going to just go, what I like to do in my lectures is run through the actual curriculum page just to make sure that I didn't miss anything with you all before we take questions and then move on to the assignments. So we talked about Git versus GitHub, right? Git is your local management. GitHub is pushing that off to a remote server somewhere on the internet that you can access. Great for collaboration, great for remote version control. We talked about creating a new repo, which you're going to do from github.com. Then we talked about how to push up a repository from the command line, right? So with that remote add origin, that's going to set up the connection between your Git repo locally and your GitHub repo. Git push is what you use to send your changes locally. Now, everyone shout it out. Do your changes need to be committed or added before you push?
Committed.
Committed. Perfect. Yep. So make all your adds, commit it, then push it. Standard procedure. So that's good to keep in mind. And again, the first time you do it, follow the instructions. If you type in git push, it's not gonna create an error, but it'll tell you to do the set upstream origin main or set upstream origin master. Do that, and then after that, you just need to type git push in every time. Refresh your GitHub repo after you make the push so that you can actually see the changes populate. And let's see, we talked about git log, and this is a nice demonstration of what I was mentioning with the like adding files and then changing files. It shows you things that were deleted and added. We talked about how to push up a git branch as well. Remember, when you're pushing, you're only pushing one branch at a time. If you want to push up another branch, you have to switch your branches and then push up branches individually. And pull requests are also a good thing to keep in mind. So PRs, which is a nice, snazzy, quick way to say it. I think hip is what the kids would say. But this basically allows you to more easily kind of it's kind of like a merge, but a merge on GitHub. So if Scott and Nicholas are both working on code, and Nicholas, let's say, is working off of an older version of Scott's code, like he wants Scott to have his new code, Scott can do a pull request to essentially get Nicholas's code and see the differences between Scott's code and Nicholas's code, for example. So it's a great tool to use it in that way. And you guys will be doing PRs in your assignments as well. Let's see, syncing with remote. Yep, we can do that with git pull. And that's kind of doing it the other way, right? So we do git push to sync remote with your local. If you want to sync your local with your remote, you can do it using git pull. And then git clone is in order to pull down something that is on GitHub but is not on your computer. So I know this all might sound a little bit complicated, but the general procedure that I like to follow when doing Git procedures is you'll either do a git init or a git clone. And I'm typing this in the chat so everyone has it. After that, you're going to make your changes. You could also, if you need to, you could do a git checkout or git switch, to add your branch, make whatever changes that you're trying to make. Then you'll want to do git add, git commit -m, and then add your message. Once you do that, you'll probably want to do a if you did git init, you'll probably want to do a git remote add origin URL. After that, you can do your git push, and then eventually do a git pull. For that, I know there's a bunch of aviation folks in here, as one of them myself. Make a checklist, sticky note it. It will make run through this almost like you're running through a flow, and it'll make it a lot easier. At first, this will be painful, and this will not be fun because you're going to be copy and pasting the same commands in every time. Within a month, this will become second nature. And building these habits in early is really, really important. That's it for lecture. I know it was a bit of a long one, but let's stop it there and take any questions y'all have.
Will we eventually be using GitHub Desktop? The app?
I have actually never touched it personally.
Yeah, I think it's newer, but I've heard like mixed things on it.
As have I. Right now, no, because the OG way to do it, to be very honest, is through the command line. And anyway, like doing GitHub GitHub Desktop is basically just a fancy UI that does
Mhm.
the command line stuff and a few other things. But short answer in the present is no. Long term, when you're on your personal projects like 5 months from now, sure. But right now, for learning purposes, no. Also, one other thing to caution, I think this kind of mentions it right here. Debugging when you're using a visual GUI tool is way harder than debugging when you're in the command line. As when you're in the command line, you're getting the unfiltered raw error messages coming in from Git. It's super easy to do a Git status or Git log or check where your head is and etc. It's a lot harder to do that when you're, like doing drag and drop. So because of that, that's a long answer to a short question, but no. Hopefully that's helpful. Other questions? All right, so I'm going to end the recording before I start mentioning